every single day.
People want to connect with someone who...
Self-expression is life.
It is the challenge. It's a challenge of life. You can't get mad at other people for not seeing your vision.
It was all about a grind. Like I said, I was selling CDs, DVDs, and clothes out the trunk of my
Whatever
car.
it takes.
This is for the people. Don't forget that.
Episode 29, the Hustle Chronicles podcast. I'm here with David Salinas, serial entrepreneur, award-winning marketing marketing guy, and real estate developer, and most importantly, hype man.
Yeah, I'm a hustler.
He hustles. So I think, one of the best parts, I think, of interviewing you is you're one of the first entrepreneurs that have so many different types of entrepreneur journeys all happening at the same time, parallel with each other. So let's just start off in the beginning. Who is David Salinas? How did you even get into entrepreneurship before it became this flashy Instagram phenomenon? And, how did you get here?
I come from humble beginnings. So I grew up in New York City in Queens, in Jamaica, Queens, as a kid, born and raised. And I don't come from much. My mother was I'd say lower middle class German Jew. Grew up in Queens as well. Met my father, who had just moved to. My father moved to the United States probably around. I want to say he was like 19 years old. From South America, from Peru.
Nice.
And he took on. He was probably much lower class, poor, as far as money was concerned. They met each other, had us, and we were just like scrappy kids, like street kids, right? Like growing up for us, it was so different. I was like riding buses at 10 years old,
Yep.
City buses and that kind of thing. But I think growing up poor, so we grew up in these buildings in Queens. There was 6 brick buildings on one block, and my father eventually became the superintendent of those buildings.
Oh, job.
I recently learned the story. The unions were looking for superintendents if you got certified in boilers. My mother's father helped my father get certified in boilers.
Wow.
And then once he was able to get certified, he was able to get a job as a super and then run the buildings. And then being a superintendent, they gave you a free apartment.
Yep.
And a very small salary. They gave him a small salary as a superintendent, and then we grew up in those buildings. So each building had 84 apartments. There was 6 buildings, and he managed the whole thing. So the porters, the maintenance men, the whole 9 yards, and everything sort of revolved around there.
Of course.
But something that was really interesting about where we were is that you had people that had no money,
Yep.
and then you had like the beginnings of money.
Yep.
Like there was a kid on my block who lived on the second floor of the building behind mine, and his father owned a liquor store in Manhattan.
Wow.
Right? Like that's
Big deal, yeah.
Yeah, it's a big deal. They had a house in the Hamptons. His father drove a Porsche and an Infiniti.
He was on his way up.
Yeah, and we had like an '86 Nissan Stanza with like
Oh, that's nice.
with no radio in it because the fucking radio kept getting stolen. So, but I think for me, that I always think I do think that entrepreneurship started by seeing what people had,
Yep.
right, and not having it, and
Yep.
being like, how do I get this? But then also, where we lived, there was gangsters.
Yep.
Right, we had a lot of gangsters. So John Gotti was from my neighborhood. He was on like 85th Street and 158th Avenue. I was on 86th and 155th.
Wow.
We had, and then you had the kids and the sons and the nephews, and these kids had like Lexuses and Rolexes, and they had money.
Yep.
Right, the clothes, all that stuff. And then you go home and you're like, hey, can I get my pair of sneakers for the year?
Parents like,
You don't get it. So I think there's a driver there.
Yeah.
Also, I was considered a gifted child.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I had a very high IQ. I learned how to multiply in kindergarten. I was multiplying in kindergarten. I actually didn't learn in kindergarten. I learned outside of school and could multiply at a very young age. So I picked up on math and certain subjects really quickly and easily.
That's pretty rare. I feel like most of the time you hear dyslexic, not good at school,
Yeah.
you're an entrepreneur that actually was good at school.
No, I wasn't good at school.
You were just gifted.
I was just gifted.
I see.
Yeah, it's a huge difference.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah, I was wild in school. Like I still don't think that they've learned how to take a student like me and teach them, because I can't be taught. You cannot tell me to read a book and learn. Like, it just doesn't work for me. I need to talk to people.
Yeah.
I learned through osmosis, right? Like my best lessons were around people where I could just shut up and listen and learn. In fact, my podcast,
Forward Obsessed. Shout out to Forward Obsessed.
Thank you.
Amazing. It really is.
I'm talking to entrepreneurs. Like, it's people. I hope that people get a ton of value from it, but I get a ton of value from it. You do?
Get it. Yeah, I think you're incredible at interviewing. I think
Thanks.
one of the parts that I loved is you're talking, right? You ask these really amazing questions that I feel like I learned a lot from watching your interviewing skills, but we never heard from you, right? We never heard your entrepreneur journey, which is, I know, why you wanted to come on here. But yeah, I mean, if I watch, that's all I do is, you can ask Roger, all I do is listen to podcasts, watch podcasts while I'm working out, while I'm swimming. Yeah. And I would say yours is one of the best ones I've started watching this year.
I appreciate that. I really do. Thank you for saying that. So for me, it's a way for me to learn. Every time if you could see me on the off camera writing notes down, like, I'm thinking about things, it's sparking my ideas for my content. It's also teaching me better ways to be an entrepreneur, to be a leader, to deal with certain things. And I think that that's a key component of it. So the truth of the matter is, I went to a gifted school in Queens. So back to my block, right? We had the block of 6 buildings, and then right across the street was the elementary school. Wow. So for kindergarten and first grade, my brother and his friends and all the kids on the block would meet in the outside the buildings, and then everybody would walk to school, and I would go to the corner and get on a bus and leave everybody. Wow. And travel 45 minutes to a school for gifted kids. And then I got kicked out of that school because they couldn't tame me, right? I was a free kid. I wanted to do whatever I wanted, right, which I also think is a trait of an entrepreneur, right? Like, it's really hard to confine me to a box.
Of course. Someone tells you no, and then that sparks the energy of proving them wrong.
Exactly. Even right now, I'm starting up a new business, and I've got partners, and I've got big, partners with big money and big capital, and I struggle with that. I struggle with having to talk to and ask for permission or anything like that, because I have a really good gut for what I do, and I also like to move the ball forward as quickly as possible. I'm always looking for, I'm always running as hard as I can after the no, so that I can move on to see if I can figure out and piece together my vision and my puzzle. But I think that that's sort of the making of David the entrepreneur.
Was there anything that you were hustling to sell as a kid just to get moving? I
sold everything. So my first job was, I was a busboy, 12 years old. I got a job as a busboy at a pizzeria. Wow. And it was great. Minimum wage was like $4. We were making like $2 an hour plus tips, and we were sharing tips, and it was a pretty good, busy pizzeria, so they used to make a ton of money. So we would wind up at like 15, 20, $25 an hour.
Amazing for a 12-year-old.
Yeah, 12 years old. Especially when I started to see, like, I saw my dad's check, and I was like, wow. Yeah. Like, that's not a lot of money. Yeah. Right? And then from there, I had street hustles. I did some illegal stuff as a kid.
All great entrepreneurs did.
Yeah. So. I had I'll tell you a funny story. The pizzeria that I worked for, the delivery guys made a killing. Yeah. Right? Delivering pizza, because you could take 3-4 deliveries at a time, and because it was in buildings, you might have 2 on a floor.
Oh, wow.
You could, because it's the density of the city, you could take on multiple deliveries at once. But I didn't have a license yet. I could drive, but I didn't have a driver's license. So I convinced the owner to give me the job, because he's like, I need a delivery guy. And I was like, I got this. And I called my older brother, and I was like, hey, I got us a job. And he was like, what do you mean, us a job? And I was like, you're going to drive, and I'm going to run into the buildings. I was like, and we're going to maximize how much money.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
So that was a hustle. And then I sold stuff, like if I could get I got to be careful of everything that I talk about that I sold, but I bought and flipped. I was a buyer and flipper. My father used to do it too. Yeah. He was like doing apartments after a while. But I did watches,
Oh, nice.
furniture, mid-century modern furniture.
Still very popular right now.
Yeah. I sold an Ethan Allen grandfather clock that I bought at an estate sale for $300. I sold it for $1,200 on eBay. I had somebody come from Ohio to pick it up. I remember that. I sold baseball cards, hockey cards, all kinds of memorabilia. I opened up an Italian ice store when I was 19 years old in Miami in South Beach.
Wow.
With one of my good friends from back home in Queens. Didn't work out. We were way too young, and Miami was way too chaotic for him. I was like a babysitter in the deal. So that was my role, was to babysit him.
So then how'd you make it to Connecticut?
So most of the people that I grew up around, you had like really good people, typically blue collar, hardworking, and then you had a lot of like gangster, criminal type, like I had a hitman in my building. Like years later, we would learn this guy was a hitman, right? Like, I learned how to fit in to those groups and crowds and hang out with everybody and make money and learn from them. And I learned a lot of things, like confidence. There's nothing more confident than a gangster.
Yep.
Right? Like they have an aura about them that they just exude unfuckwithability.
Right. It's true.
But I also didn't appreciate the lack of intelligence. Muscle over intelligence to me didn't necessarily jive right. So I was always looking for a way out. Right. When I was 13, I begged my father to let me drop out of high school.
Wow.
Was I 13? Maybe 13 or 15. I was like, just let me drop out and just get my GED and then I'll go to college. I just want to get it over with.
Yeah.
And he didn't allow that to happen. But I was always looking for an escape. And then my older brother, Paul, he was at Binghamton, which is a SUNY school in New York. And he had finished and then came back to Queens. And I didn't really see him because he had like an apartment up there and he rarely came home. And when he did, he had a girlfriend. And then he came back and he and I became a little closer finally. And he told me he was going to come to Connecticut to sign up for chiropractic school. He decided he didn't want to go to medical school. He wanted to be a chiropractor. It was like a big passion of his. And he said, can you go to Connecticut with me? Do you want to take a ride? And I literally said to him, where the fuck is Connecticut?
I mean, if you're not from Connecticut, why would you ever know it?
Yeah. And he said, we're going 45 minutes past Grandma's house. So if you think about Flushing and that Whitestone lanes, you get on the Van Wyck, Whitestone, and then 45 minutes later, if you're at no traffic, you're in Bridgeport. Right. So we go to Bridgeport, and he's signing up for chiropractic school, doing all his stuff. And I was in the building, sitting there, looking out the window. The registrar and the bursar's office was on the 6th floor of the library. And I'll never forget looking out the window, seeing the Long Island Sound, seeing the park over there, and thinking that Bridgeport was the most beautiful place ever. Right? Think of, like that.
I mean, if you're coming from New York.
Yeah, from Queens, East New York, and we had the Rockaway Beach and all that stuff, but it was a different place, right? Like, I always say, like, I've been shot at in Bushwick, where there are multi-million-dollar homes now, right?
I haven't been shot at.
Yeah. Like, New York is very different. So anyway, I thought Bridgeport was beautiful. I wound up talking my way into the University of Bridgeport.
Wow.
So that night, it was like 6:00 at night. I knocked on a door. I was talking to the security guard. I forget her name. I want to say it was maybe Toya. I forget today. But I told her, I was like, Bridgeport's beautiful. I should go here. And she was like, you're fucking crazy. She's like, we're the worst city in America right now, per murder per capita. And I was like, come on, this is Connecticut. I'm from New York. Right. Like, I just dismissed everything about Connecticut and made up a story that it was the place.
You wanted to escape, right? So.
Yeah. So I literally walk up to the room, to the registrar's office. There was one guy left in there. I knocked on the door and I asked him if he would allow me, if I could go. I said, can I go here? And he was like shocked by my question. And he said, did you apply? And I said, no. And he said, and he just started asking me a bunch of questions. Did you take your SAT? No. He said, did you graduate high school? I said, yes. He said, what were your grades like? I said, whatever you needed to graduate. And he was like, say more. And I was like, I just did the bare minimum because my father told me that you had to get a diploma, right? Because my father's understanding, was a high school diploma is everything.
Is better, yeah.
What he didn't understand is the grades and the SAT and the testing and the college touring and like all of the things, like what your major is and what it means to go to an Ivy League school or a top 10, you know what I mean? Like he didn't understand those fundamentals because he was an immigrant. For him, he just thought, become a doctor or a lawyer, and didn't know how to do either one. So I had very little guidance in that respect. My mother had passed away, by the way, when I was 12. So it was a single parent household. I always say the streets raised me. Like the streets really raised me.
Yeah.
Like that's how it was. I was always out on the streets from the minute I woke up to the minute I went and laid my head down. I would walked in my room and put my head down on the bed, and that was my day.
And think about how much better it was, right? Versus now where everyone's just sitting at home looking at their phone.
Yeah, exactly. So go back. He's asking me all these questions. He winds up getting really interested in me. Maybe like I was like some type of a specimen, right? Like a psychological study. So he brings me in the room. We sit down and he starts asking me all these questions. Why did you do bad in school? My first high school was in Rockaway. At the time, one of the worst high schools in the city had shut down. Far Rock shut down. So all those kids got bused into my school. So we were getting like people were approaching us to steal from us all the time. I was getting into fights constantly. I left that school, went to John Adams in South Ozone Park, South Jamaica. And that was wild. You had every gang you could imagine. You had the Italian gangs from all the different neighborhoods. You had the Indian gangs. You had the Latin Kings, the Nietas. You had like just it's a war zone. It was a school made for 1,800 students or 1,500 students that had 3,600 students at the time. Crazy. 50 kids in a classroom, right? Metal detectors, magnetic doors. Right, like so you couldn't get in, to protect the gangs from coming in. Like imagine the type of war zone that was. So like I told him all this, and I said, and I was more interested in making money, and and fucking around. And he was like, and still you managed to graduate. Like you didn't get your GED. There's no record, like DEC, what do they call it? DCF records or anything with your parents. And I was like, no. I was always able to skirt the rules. Like they would give you the syllabi, say this is what you needed to pass, and I would study it, and I'd be like, I'm going to do exactly that.
Yep.
So, long story short, he turns around and accepts me into the University of Bridgeport. Right there on the spot.
Wow.
No application, no SAT, no essay, and no transcript. Like he was like, can you prove that you graduated? And I said, yeah. And we did that the next day. And he was like, do you have money? And I said, no. And he's like, all right, we'll sign you up for financial aid. And they did that. And he said, what do you want your major to be? And I said, what the fuck is a major? And he goes, oh, sorry, am I allowed to curse on this?
Oh, you're allowed to.
So I said, what the fuck is a major? And he goes, biology or this or that. And I said, all right, yeah, my dad said I got to be a doctor. My brother's my brother's going to be a doctor. Let's go with that, biology. And he was like, all right, what do you want your elective to be? And I was like,
just tell me.
He was like, well, you want to soften your load because you don't want to do too much and stress yourself out. So I would suggest like an art class or a music. And I was like, no, my father says that's all bullshit. Don't waste my time with that. I was all about time efficiency already. You could sort of start to see my mentality. I said, my father says that's all bullshit. I'm not going to get anywhere with that stuff. Even though I was crazy artistic, like I could draw, I could oil paint, I could still, you give me a piece of paper and a pen, I could draw Spider-Man for you right now. And I'll be better than 90% of the people that could draw, right? So I said, give me a business class. And he gave me a marketing class. That marketing class and that professor would change everything for me. I would become friends with who would become one of my best friends, Tim. He's an executive at Facebook today. He was from Staten Island. I was from Queens. I didn't respect him because he was from Staten Island. I hated Staten Island at the time. I still dislike people from Staten Island. They don't wear sleeves.
Yeah, we have a couple.
I'm just messing around.
We have a couple coworkers from Staten Island. We give them so much shit.
Yeah. Staten Island is everything that New York City. It's like a melting pot of all the habits of New York City, Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, Long Island, and then they took it and they intensified it and made it Staten Island. They made it their own. I joke around. I love him. I love his family. The Staten Island people are great, but we always tease each other. You know, that's how it is. Boroughs against boroughs, neighborhoods against neighborhoods. But anyway, we became best of friends. The teacher was a madman from the Madman era, so Madison Avenue guy in the marketing and advertising space, and he saw something in me that nobody could see. I was disruptive in classes. I cursed in class. Like I was a street kid walking into a university. It is not what's supposed to happen, right? So first day they came up to me, they're like, "You're not supposed to be drinking a 22 of Heineken in the dorm room, in the dorm hallways, in the hallway." Right. And I was like, well, "Why not?"
Right.
I'm
just relaxing right now.
This is what I do. I get a 22 of Heineken and I sit down on the couch and watch TV.
Yep.
It's crazy how far I've come. And that was it. So he accepted me and I went home. I told my father, my friends, the people I worked with. I told the gangster, like I worked for this gangster at the time, and he gave me the biggest hug. And he was
happy.
Like, he goes, "You're smarter than these other guys." And he's like, we don't hustle on the street to stay on the street. We hustle on the street to advance our families. He's like, and the smart guys' families, they progress and they break out of that generational issue, right? And which was how he was intelligent. That's why I worked for him. Yeah. He wasn't a muscle guy. He was a smart guy. And that was it. And then I came to Connecticut. I moved here and I never left.
Wow.
I never left. I went to South Beach after that first semester and started that business, came back, and then just bounced around Connecticut. And then I fell in love with Connecticut. I thought it was great, right?
I still think it's great.
Yeah.
So looking back at that professor who basically gave you a shot, was that like your first mentor?
Yeah.
Obviously you had the gangsters, I get that, but like someone who like really saw that you were going to be something special.
I think I had mentors along the way. Like I wouldn't say my first like
influential.
Yeah. So like, cause growing up we had like, there are people that took a liking to me. I worked for like the guy that had the good plumbing business and I did, I was a laborer and stuff like that. But like, as far as like a professional sort of like the big maturation moment for me, it was definitely him. So what he would say to people was, he said this to Tim, actually, my buddy. And Tim told me, he said, you got to watch that kid because he's going to be special because he doesn't think like everybody else. Mm-hmm. Like when we would do case studies, everybody would take the same approaches for every case study we were watching. Yeah. And I would break the case study and I would figure out a way to do something differently. And it's also, if you ever listen to my content, you'll hear me tell people quite often, one of the triggers I have in my brain is when someone says that's the way it's always been done. Yep. It's instant. My brain almost like, it's like I turn into like a zombie. I'm like, I have to focus on that and figure out if it is truly the only way it's been done. And I think that's what makes entrepreneurship fun. Yeah.
For me, it's when someone says, I have to tell you the truth. For me, I just like haywire and I'm like, okay, let's go back here. What are you not telling me the truth of that? You have to say that. So you become you take a marketing class. When do you switch?
So I immediately. So next semester, for starters, I was terrible. Chemistry fucking wrecked me.
I tried to take some science classes and it's so much harder.
Yeah. So I immediately switched. I went full business and heavy marketing programs. And then I had a blast after that, right? Still didn't do great in college. Like, I mean, if you look at my business classes, I had good grades. Everything else was sort of like middle of the road. I probably graduated with like a C, like President Bush.
There you go.
But that was it. But I was making money. I was probably making close to $200,000 plus a year.
Flipping
stuff, throwing parties in Bridgeport for different colleges. I mean, if there was a way to make money, I was making it. Right? Like I was doing anything and everything. I spend more time making money than I spent going to college.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
So now you start Digital Surgeons first.
So I got out of college. I worked first for a company.
Okay.
So I walk into I had a couple jobs, but ultimately I wound up answering a newspaper ad. Okay, in the newspaper, not like a newspaper, digital online newspaper. Right. It was a physical newspaper ad. It was this little cutout in the New Haven Register that said digital marketing, sales position, $25 an hour plus incentives, and a phone number. It was the tiniest little ad, and I answered it, just hoping it wasn't one of those like Cutco like knife selling things, because you find all the different schemes when you're always on the hunt for opportunity. You find all the scams and all the pyramids and all the stuff. And I walk into this shitty little office in New Haven, right here on Whitney and Trumbull, to a company that did, and this guy sits down and tells me that they do something called search engine optimization. Okay, it's 2002.
Wow.
And he goes, and I said, what is that? Like, it wasn't like I could prepare or study up on the business and get ready for my interview. No. Like, it was a newspaper ad. It was all you got. It wasn't like a LinkedIn. Yeah, like there's no way to prepare for the interview. So I said, what is that? And the guy says, I'll never forget. He said, we manipulate websites to come to the top of the search engines for keywords. And I said, you got to be kidding me. I said, you can do that? And he goes, yeah. And I was like, I'm in. What do I got to do? And he was like, well, you get paid $300 a week plus commissions. And we have this, they had built this ridiculous incentive structure. It was unattainable.
It always is, right?
But on top of it, it was false advertising. It wasn't $25 an hour, right? So it was $300 a week. You could do the math. It's like less than $10 an hour. So I sold him at the table right there. His name was Michael Buckley. I said, do me a favor. I said, are you the decision maker? And he said, I'm 22 years old. I got huge nuts, right? I said, are you the decision maker? And he goes, well, no. He's like, I report to the owner. And I said, great. I said, tell him I'm going to be the best that he has in the room. I said, I want $500 a week. Wow. I said, and I'll start. And he goes, hold on. He walks out of the room. He comes back. He goes, you got yourself a deal. I start. It was the most unsophisticated office, but the guy was really smart. And he came up with a pretty sophisticated scripting process and technologies. They were writing it in like Visual Basic, like old school computer language.
Not AI?
No, not AI. Definitely not AI, not yet. But it was like primitive, but they got it. So it was like all your rebuttals and all, everything in the sales process, but it was all garbage. So I immediately start rewriting every script, like right out of the gate. I start rewriting and I start hitting boom, boom, boom. I'm like closed. Before you know it, my number is like 75% of the number, and there's like 11 guys in the room with me, and I'm crushing on the phones, and I'm playing the game, and I'm killing it. So I positioned myself where I was doing a decent amount of the business, and I was like, hey, I'm out if you can't make this more lucrative for me, because I look around, no one in the room is good. Like you should be getting rid of 7, 8, 9 of these guys. I rewrote the scripts. I know how to close this business. I know how to open it. And he was like, fine. So he let me clean house, and we started to build. The problem was, at the time, he's really smart. He's a brilliant guy. I really never mentioned his name or anything, but he's at the time, I think he had a lot of money coming in from these businesses. It was very lifestyle for him. So he had like the Mercedes and the cool apartment in downtown, and he was on Match.com all day long trying to get laid. It didn't. And in my mind, I'm always thinking about generational wealth. I'm already there. Like I was there at 16. So now I'm 22. I'm behind schedule in my mind. He said to me, I told him, I said, if you look at like iProspect and 360i and these companies, they're getting valuations at like 25 million, 35 million. And I'm like, that's us. We have to get there. And I knew that he wasn't investing back in the business. So I tried to get him to invest in the business, but he played games too much. He'd make things 5% too high, or just little things that he would do. And it frustrated me to the point where I wound up just leaving. Wow. And I don't think he realized just how powerful I was in his organization already. So like, anybody that was worth their weight was going to follow me, right? I'm a good recruiter. People believe in me. I exhibit that those leadership qualities. And at the time, so now rewind a little bit, 2004, so a couple years in, this guy, I also was like really into music, and I still am. Like, music's a big part of my life. If you ever listen to, like, I'll like throw in like rap lines all the time. I had this dream of being like a Lior Cohen, right? Like a Lior Cohen from Def Jam, or like a P. Diddy that doesn't rap, that just has like artists. So I had a studio in Norwalk that I backed this kid who lived in the projects, and he was a really talented musician. And then I met this Russian kid who was an amazing engineer, and I put them together. He introduces me to this guy, and he goes, "You got to meet this kid. His name, they call him Pete the Geek. And he's a computer nerd, and he does the computer stuff that you do." Pete and I meet. Pete was 2 years younger than me, and Pete's like, "Yeah, I make websites, and I do design, and brand, and blah, 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 blah." And we sit down, and I was like, "Hey, I'll pass you work, and you pass me work, and, we'll make a referral network." That was my initial sort of how we work together. And then we'll go to the bars, and we'll work out together because he was cool, and he was local, and I liked him. And he was also one of the smartest people I've ever met in my life. So now I'm like, I'm in the networking phase, right? And I'm like this young, I was fascinated by him. He was so young, and yet he was nerdy, right? So he knew how to code, and he knew how to design.
He did everything you didn't know how to do.
All of the things, shortcuts, his speed, his vocabulary, everything. It was fascinating. So I immediately get a lead for a piece of business. Actually, the creative director for Starter started up a company called Sedgwick and Cedar. He was in the building, and Sedgwick and Cedar is the corner of the birthplace of hip hop. Is in New York City, in the Bronx. And he was launching a business, and he's like, "I need a website." So I was like, "I got the guy for you." So I called Pete, and I was like, "Hey, this guy wants to get a beautiful Flash website." Flash was the shit back then.
Yep.
Interactive, right? Yep. And I was like, and I got you to lay up. Like, it's good to go. Just go in there. And he was like, Pete's like, "What should I charge him?" And I was like, "Whatever. What do you mean?" I was like, "You don't know how to sell your business?" And he goes, "No." I was like, "What would you charge for a website like this? Like a hot shit website?" And he's like, "I don't know, $2,500. I said, "You're fucking crazy. Charge him $27,000. I just pulled that number completely out of my ass.
Yep.
And he goes, "I can't do that." And I said, "Fine, I'll do it for you."
I was gonna say.
So I closed the deal for $27,000. And Pete just looked at me, and he was like, can you do that again?"
Yeah.
And I was like, "Sure." So we become friends, and we start developing a business plan. I break from this company, I quit. I drive to Pete's office, which was in Orange, Connecticut. And I said, "Hey, I just made the jump." I said, "You ready to go?" And he was like, "Let's do it." And cool. I was like, he had the name Digital Surgeon. So I was like, "I like your name."
Yeah, I think it's a great name.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think I'd make some changes to it today.
Of course, a little confusing.
Well, we're not digital. Like digital was air to me back then. It was a necessity, and nobody was doing digital. Mm-hmm. So I thought it was great back then. But then, like, we've done experiential. We came up with an idea to change the lights on the Empire State Building for Kanye West, right? Like, we sold it to him. He just didn't have the money. He went nuts over the idea. That is digital, but that transcends digital. That takes it to out of home, right? So, like, I'm more interested in marketing strategy and innovation
and execution. It sounds like.
And execution and surprise, right? I'll tell you the Kanye idea really quick because it's cool. So Kanye at the time was all about red and black. He has synesthesia, so he sees music in colors.
Yep.
Right. And everything he was doing was red and black at the time. And they had just changed the top of the Empire State Building to the Philips hues. Yep. Right. So you could change the colors.
Yep.
So we said, what if we wrote a program that could read Twitter? Because at the time you could tap into the Twitter pipes and through the API. What if we could read Twitter and see how New York City was trending with words that represented love or hate, and then change the color on top of the Empire State Building for a period of time.
So it's like a meter
for the launch of it's like a meter for the launch of Kanye's new album and his movie, which was like the 7-screen movie. And I'll never forget it. We were in Def Jam's office and we pitched him this idea, and he wasn't in the room. His manager was in the room, and he just starts screaming, "Yeah, you gonna love this shit. Yeah, you gonna love this shit." And we had just won like a Webby Award with Lady Gaga, and like we were like the company was popping and we were killing it. And then we were like, all right, like we're looking at like $500,000 to $750,000 budget.
Right. He's like,
and they were like, we got 75 G's, and we were like, you're not gonna love this shit.
mm-hmm.
But like that was the sort of like, anyway, go rewind. That's why digital didn't work,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because it was like we transcended that, right? Branding and innovation and business innovation. So anyway, rewind. We decided to launch the business, and that first
2007,
2006, 2007.
Mm-hmm.
That first year we did $500,000 in revenue.
Amazing.
And that was it. And then it was just climb.
And obviously you weren't in this insane workplace that you're in now. So where did you start?
So first we were in Pete's office, which was a shared office with another company in Orange, Connecticut, next to a trailer park. I used to have to mute the phone because the chihuahuas in the trailer park was so loud.
Love it.
It was crazy. And then I told him we were going to move, and he was like, I just don't want to move to New York. And I was like, no, we're not going to go to New York. And he's like, where are we going to go? I was like, we're going to go to New Haven. And he was like, why? And I said, because everybody around the world knows New Haven. It's this tiny city that has incredible visibility and awareness.
Yep.
So if I talk to a company in Rome, they know New Haven.
Because of Yale.
Or pizza or the hospital or something, right? Starter.
So true.
Yeah, it has so much history, and I really respected that history, which the respect that I have would then lead to the passion that I had for the city, which would then lead to the successes that I would have in the city after that.
And the relationships you've built.
All of it.
Yeah.
Literally all of that stuff. So we went from Orange we moved to a building in Worcester Square on Olive and Grand Avenue, and we had no money. So we were supposed to raise money. We went to a group of guys, real estate guys, to raise money. 2006. Okay. And this one guy, Bill Silverman, another mentor, awesome dude. He was like he was one of the most successful real estate brokers in the city of New Haven.
Wow.
He hustled, he flipped stuff.
Yep.
He would do $7 million deals in real estate and sell a $5 Batman belt buckle that he bought it for $1, and he would be happier over the markup that he got from that belt buckle than the commission he got from a $7 million deal. Like it was incredible.
This is Gary Vee before Gary Vee.
All day. I mean, there's tons of Gary V's. They used to tell me I was Gary Vee. Like that's just the way we were.
Yeah.
Right? This guy was the shit, man. He was awesome, and he took a real liking to me. And most people would not. I always say my favorite people were I used to call them gray hairs, which I shouldn't say no more because I got some. That I loved being around older people, man. There's just the wisdom. Like you take my wonder with their wisdom. Pete wrote an article called "Bridging Wonder and Wisdom." Like you take my sort of curiosity for the world and all the things that I know, and like bridge it with the wisdom of like this 60-something-year-old guy who literally came up to me and he's like, there's 2 things you need to know about me. I smoke a lot of weed and I smoke a lot of cigarettes. And I was like, light up.
Yeah.
Right. And he loved that. And we got along. He introduces me to a landlord on Grand Avenue that had a space. And I walk in and he was like, I want $700 a month for the lease for this office. And I said, great. I'll give you $150 a month. And I'll pay you the balance at the end of the year.
Yep.
And the guy goes, okay, you got a deal. And that's how we did it. And Pete and I just walked in. So we were scrappy, man. So fucking scrappy. Went there, expanded twice in that building, tried to buy the building, tried to build WeWork before WeWork in that building.
I know.
We actually went to the city. We got a grant from the city. They said that they would back us and loan us the money to buy the building. But the guy, he was a mortgage flipper at the time, which is why the housing bubble happened.
Yeah.
He was in that space and he got crushed. He needed like twice as much money to bail out that building. So it didn't work. Then we would move to the building across the street from District, which is now a U-Haul, huge warehouse, put our office there. We were the first ones to do something cool in that kind of space. And then from there, that building got bought by this guy in New York who wanted to convert it into like a Costco or something. And that's how we would wind up with District, because he bought that building, and then it caused me to start looking for a new space. And in my mind, I was like, I'm never gonna be with another landlord again. I want to be
the landlord.
Yeah. And that's how I found District, and that was like how things started to happen for that.
So before we get into District, because this is such an insane warehouse facility, so many incredible brands are here. I think one of the hardest things for entrepreneurs in general is making that jump, right? Like, obviously you were super passionate about digital surgeons, but you also wanted to branch out and do more, right? So like, what did that conversation look like when you started to get interested in other ventures with your partner, who was probably like, what the fuck? I want you to be fully focused in digital surgeons.
So the good news is that Pete is not like that.
Wow.
And it could be to our detriment, because digital surgeons could have been much, much bigger if we were way, way more focused. But like, we're both very much polymaths in the sense that we just, like, yesterday I was at a restaurant with my wife, and the restaurant is called Hachiroku. And I was like, she's like, what do you think it means? And I said, I think it's a number. And she goes, how do you know that? And I said, it's Nisansi Goraku Shichiku. And she was like, we've been know each other 13 years.
How do you know this?
She didn't know that I knew Japanese.
Yeah.
And I was like, Roku 6, Hachi 8. I was like, 86. And the guy's like, yeah. He's like, all the founders were born in 86. And she's like, how do you know that? And I was like, I know Chinese 1 to 10 too. Like, we just know a lot of stuff, like, because we like to learn. We're both, he crushes books and I meet people and talk to people. Neither one of us were focused. And we love the agency business and the services business, and still do. But it's a hard business to be in when you work with people that don't see the value, right? Like Josh talked about this when your brother talked about this on the podcast when we had him on, which is that he didn't respect marketing. So he had like a junior marketer doing everything.
Until we got big time.
Until we got the big time. And it was, and was it big time, or was it just the shift of hiring better? Right?
It was probably both.
Yeah.
Being able to afford someone who has a 6-figure salary, plus also realizing we're not in the operations business. We're in the marketing business.
He and I sat down and we talked about that. He knew that. He just wasn't comfortable. Right. Because he didn't know it. Right. And all that stuff. So like, when you're selling services to people like your brother at the time, it can get very frustrating because they don't have the risk appetite. They don't have the money aptitude. They don't have, they do or they don't have the money, but they don't value it. Like we had a prospect the other day that the team was telling me about, and I don't work full time for the business anymore, but they were doing let's say they were doing $1 billion in revenue, right?
So now we're looking at they should about have $100 million in marketing spend,
and their goal was to get to $5 billion. And they want to spend $200,000, right?
So they should be spending $200 million a year on marketing, and they want to spend what?
Bingo, $200,000, right? And that's a perfect example. So like for me and him, it was very frustrating. At the same time, we're seeing companies get funded, and we're heavy into the angel world and the investors and the venture capital guys. They love us, and we see all these people making businesses and exiting and getting to that wealth and doing great stuff, and we were more interested in that. So like he and I dabbled. We started with product. So we created, one day we were like, we had this like epiphany in a car driving back from White Plains. We had the USTA as a client, right? So we landed the US Open, the Tennis Open. Yeah. I changed the rules of tennis for children. I was the marketer behind that, the strategist to help on the digital side. When that happened with Michelle Obama and all the people, like I got brought into the room in the 11th hour to handle the digital strategy because they had not thought about that. And we had this concept for recce's, for location scouts. How come, like in the world of think about this right now, it's crazy to think about where we are from a content perspective. Of course, go back 2010, 11. So over a decade ago. And we had the insight that everybody's making content, and content is becoming so big, but finding locations and location scouting so that you can get to locations quickly. There's no database, right? The databases are all private under lock and key. Mm-hmm. So Pete and I said, what if we made that social? And in the car, we thought about this, we were talking, and he was like, I think that's a great idea. Like there's a waterfall in Kent, right? In Kent, Connecticut.
Yep.
Like you take a picture, you geolocate it with your phone, you put keywords behind it, and now if somebody wants to do a photo shoot, whether it's for like taking pictures of their dog or for a video shoot, they can type it, and now they've got a resource, right?
Also known as Instagram.
Instagram before Instagram.
Right.
So we did that. We called into the office. This is how fast we used to move. I fucking love operating like this. We said, we're driving back. We want this group of people in the conference room when we get back, and we want to sit down. We're going to whiteboard something out. And immediately we had a team in motion to prototype this thing. Could the basics, could you get somebody to upload? Could you figure out how to do this as a mobile application? Okay. 2010, 2011.
That's incredible.
We built it, and then it failed. That's how we met Lady Gaga. So it didn't turn into a total failure. It got to like 36,000 users across like 30 plus countries, but we couldn't fund it on our own, and we didn't know what the business plan was, and we thought it would be better for it to be owned by like Canon to create like the Dribble or like those types of portfolio sites. But they couldn't see the forest through the trees on that stuff. So it got frustrating.
The classic Netflix blockbuster.
Precisely. I mean, Canon was supposed to put their lenses in iPhones.
Right.
No, in Nokia phones. And they said no. Because they were like, oh, cameras will never be big in phones. Right? So classic story. So then we struck out there, big lesson, which was the hunter that chases two rabbits goes hungry. Right? Like we had our bread and butter, and then we had this thing.
And you were more passionate about this thing than your bread and butter.
Yeah, but we couldn't do it.
Of course.
So then we started to look at companies that we could invest in through sweat equity or capital or through those sort of resources, and where we can get in on the ground floor and just angel invest in a sense, right? And then we had a couple of those. And we got lucky on some of those. So like Arcos, the golf technology in Stanford, it's the number one golf technology in the world. I named Arcos.
Wow.
Right. Like we did the packaging, we did all the stuff that landed them in the Apple store.
Do you golf?
I do. Not well, but I love the game. Yeah. I actually started in college playing golf just on the side, swinging clubs. But yeah, so named it, branded it. So we got in the door through that. And we were looking for that, but that's sort of not sustainable because we were just using our balance sheet, right? We weren't rich kids. We were just sort of like, Pete and I, we paid ourselves $300 a week for the first 8 months, and then we got a raise to $400.
Nice,
right? And
big
then
raise.
Yeah, exactly. And then, we were smart, scrappy. We used to go to business conferences, and we'd go to Costco or BJ's and buy a TV. Bring it to the conference as a display, and then put it back in the box and drop it back off.
And those are the most exciting times.
It was a great time.
Yeah,
it was definitely a great time. I do yearn for starting a business with cash where there's less stress, because I do think that not having cash
stressful
creates a stress, like for families, right?
Yeah.
It can create a rift between you and your loved ones. And in your business, it's an unnecessary stress. I think there's a balance of it.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, that was I was fortunate. And then after that, I did district, and he was actually. I had to. It was a difficult time between our relationship. It wasn't because of the focus. It was because of other things, other dynamics that happen in partnerships and relationships. I think it's important to talk about that stuff in entrepreneurship. We've now gotten past those things, but we had like a 5 to 7 year sort of stint in the 17 years that we've owned the company where we were not good.
Partnerships are tough.
Really tough, because you smell each other's fucking bullshit, right? And you see each other's
good, the bad, and everything in between.
Yeah, exactly. And habits and go-tos, and you hear the same shit over and over. And then what you wind up with is, I always refer to this, I think it's an important thing to talk about when we talk about hustle and entrepreneurship. We see each other through a lens, right? Like your glasses you're wearing right now. The baggage is smudges.
Yep.
It's dirt. And it's really difficult to clean the lens. Sometimes you got to throw the fucking things out.
Start over.
Yeah, and you got to start over. So we actually wound up getting a coach, and when we were looking for a coach, we were like, we didn't want an executive coach. I said, I wanted somebody that really understands and that focuses on optimizing relationship and psychology. And when the guy asked me, what are you trying to get? Pete's very intelligent, so he was like, I made a PowerPoint about my goals, and I was like, I just want to change the lenses on my glasses that I see him through. Like I every time he says something, I see old Pete, I can't see new Pete. And I know he's trying, and I know he's trying to be better, but I keep seeing, I see tendencies, and I go right back to, I know what he's doing, and I'm like, I'm not giving him the chance.
Yep.
So that's what I want to focus on. The guy was like shocked. He's like, that's like the first time I've ever seen someone say that in one of these meetings. So we were at that time when District started to bubble, was 2014. And then by 2016, it made sense where it was just like, I had hustled it down, for the audience.
Explain what District is, because we have a lot of New Yorkers all around the country.
Absolutely. So my warehouse where my office was got bought by a New York developer that wanted to change what it was, and I was trying to guide him as to where it could be. And at the time, I was really involved in economic development. I had joined the board of economic development for this. I was asked to join the board, which is a group of people that are focused on trying to make a city better, or state, region. And I got to hear and see what people wanted and yearned for in the city of New Haven, in the region. So I had a good sense of like customer, right? Like think about it as a marketer. It's like, what does the customer want? That kind of thing. What do they need? So the guy doesn't want to listen to me, the developer. I gave him a pretty good idea. He didn't want to listen to me. So I went looking for properties that I could buy and convert into my awesome, cool office. I wanted a cool office space. And my partner, Eric, who also is a big-time entrepreneur with a bunch of different businesses. He's a contractor. He does real estate development, residential, and he also owned a CrossFit gym.
Okay.
So he needed a home because the CrossFit was in the building.
Yep.
So we go searching everywhere, can't find it. And then and I'm talking about like right across the street from the warehouse is this bus depot that is now District, right? It's huge. I don't know how big it is. It is broken windows and weeds, and it is an abandoned building in the middle of a city.
Everywhere.
Yeah, it is a shithole. It is broken windows. There's lights on, but nobody in the building. The state had abandoned it.
Wow.
Trees, fences with barbed wire, covered in weeds, you can barely see through. So that one night, and it was December 2014, I'm looking at a satellite image from on Google at my building where our office was, right across the street, 1175 State Street, and I finally see a satellite image of the bus depot, and I see the river behind it, and it's 9.5 acres, 200,000 square foot of building.
Wow.
And I was like, holy shit. I said, what if I could get, it starts with what if, right? Like we always talk about, like in business, you talk about your capabilities.
Yep.
For Pete and I, we always talk about possibilities, right? It's just a different framework.
Yeah.
So I said, what if, and I printed out 11 by 17 at my house, and I take a marker and I cut a piece of the building out, and I put an atrium in the middle, and I put an amphitheater where people were going to hang out, and like a quad, like a college quad, a campus, right?
Yeah.
I start thinking about a barbecue restaurant. Literally, this is in a matter of minutes, I swear. And I take a picture with my phone, and I call Eric O'Brien, my partner, who was looking with me for real estate. And I said, what if we did this? And he goes, I've always wanted that bus depot. And I said, let me get it done. I wake up in the morning and I start slamming the phone, calling economic development people that I'm on the board of. Hey, I want to do this. And I get the thing in motion, right? Like instantly they're like, okay. And I get phone calls, and then all of a sudden there's playbooks, and it's like, we could make a series, like a podcast series, and I could like explain the whole playbook because it's so complicated what I did. The state owned the asset. The city wanted to see it back on the revenue roll. You've got Alders and Yale and this and that. It had to go up for auction for an RFP.
Million roadblocks. Everything
under the sun. And long story short is, I bought the building for $1, which is the famous story, right? The guy across the street that owned our warehouse from New York bid $3.1 million for it.
And you won?
And I beat him for $1.
Because of the relationships?
No. Well, probably. I mean, there was 7 people that were the judges for the RFP. I didn't have relationships with 5 of them. I think it was because of storytelling and branding, right? I knew what the people wanted.
Of course.
Right? It's like, if you know, it's like, this is what the city needs. This guy's like, I'm putting grocery stores and traffic on your streets. Right? And the city needed a grocery store.
Of course.
But he was like, but I said, the city needs to continue to be attractive. So you storytelling. If you have a startup company and you got a deck, you know, you're raising capital, you're recruiting people for your company, you have to storytell. That's the way that shit happens. So I was very thoughtful about that stuff, and we won it. And I bid $1. The famous story is that they asked me to increase the bid because they said, would you consider a higher bid because your competitors have bid higher than you? And I said, sure, I'll give you 4 quarters as a joke. And they all laughed. And that's part of it too. Like relationships is like making people laugh and stuff. So we won.
You reverse engineered. You figured out what they were going to actually
how the city moved.
Yep. And you win this plot of land that's complete shithole, needs to be knocked down.
Yep. Half of it.
And then like it's enormous.
Yeah.
You have CrossFit. How do you go?
So we have a full gym now.
Yeah.
So we have the District Athletic Club, which has HIIT classes, Olympic lifting, heavyweight lifting club. We have a full general fitness gym.
Wow.
Spin studio, a yoga room, saunas, towel service, showers. It's one of the higher end fitness facilities in the area. It's free to anybody who works in districts. So any offices. So if you have your company. So the concept was that it's hard to compete as a startup company or as a company when you're not in Silicon Valley, New York, or Boston, because they have all this money that they raise and all this, money that they make per person. So they're able to give way more perks and incentives for people to work for you. So the only way to do it in an environment that's early stage is for people to share and to make community. So that was sort of my philosophy. So we built a gym. Everybody pays $1 per square foot in the building towards the rent, towards the CAMs, and then that goes to the gym so that the gym has some revenue, some fixed revenue. And then we open it to the public, and then the public can come in and join, and then you get a revenue roll and you get yourself a business. So we created a business out of this concept. It's got a restaurant, a barbecue restaurant with a 6,500 square foot patio.
Wow.
Pre-COVID, I had the idea of like running gas lines underneath the ground so that you could have fire pits that that you didn't have to ever fill up with propane. So that was a big innovation. No one ever thought about that kind of stuff. So we have 6 or 7 fire pits, put in a little amphitheater, just a grass roll down so there's a stage on it. Heat above, like we heated like a whole area from above so that you could sit outside. So thinking about New England, like getting people outside in April instead of May, getting people keeping them outside in October instead of shutting down September. So getting more outside time for people. And I didn't own a restaurant. I didn't want to own a restaurant. I still don't own the restaurant, but I knew what I was like, this is what's going to be there. And then I designed it and then found a good restaurateur to come in and take over it and do it. So I own the dirt, and we designed it and built it. So we have that. We have a co-working space. originally wanted to just give it to WeWork. I was like, WeWork does it great.
Yep.
Here you go. They wanted nothing to do with New Haven. They said that there's not enough business. We usually like to be at least 20,000 square feet of space. And they said, we don't think there's a demand there, and our data tells us differently. And I said, well, what do you base your data on? And they told me, I was like, you got it all wrong. Connecticut, you don't know Connecticut. Again, you got to know your markets, right?
Yep.
Connecticut is like...
And that's why WeWork failed and are closing down a ton of them right now.
Yeah, exactly. So the data was wrong. They didn't understand the data. So I did. So I wound up just building it. I started with 18,000 square feet. We got to 100% occupied in 4 months, killing it, printing money. And then reasonable.
Yeah.
And then we decided to open up another 10,000 square feet. So 28,000 square foot co-working space. We build it. 75% reserved. So think about this. We got 100% occupancy for 9 straight months. We go into construction. This is 2018. So 2019, we go into construction to build out the final 10. We got 75% reservations on that 10,000 square feet. And then we open on March 9th, 2020.
Of course.
COVID closes down the whole country 2 days later,
Yep.
literally 2 days later. All 75% of the reservations drop on us.
Yep.
And then we start losing people out of the 100% of the 18,000, and we go down to like 40%. We go from making cash to hemorrhaging cash every single month.
Yep.
And shit hits the fan. Rewind 2016. I got 1 foot on one side of the fence with Digital Surgeons. I got 1 foot on the other with District. District has a chance to be a $25 million facility. The government has agreed to give me $6 million for free to remediate it. So I got a $5.5 million grant and then a $500,000 forgivable loan at 0% interest to clean up the space. So it wasn't a gift.
Yep.
It was to clean up what they had fucked up on the property.
Yep.
And I found a financing vehicle called a new market tax credit financing that allowed us to do a $17 million rehab with only $800,000 in equity, which is unheard of. I mean, it's less than 3%, I think. Imagine that. Like, real estate is like 35 to 50%, depending on if it's a spec project or not. I had to make a decision, and the decision was to walk away from Digital Surgeons, completely just be a chairman type of a role, and that was it, and focus on District.
Yeah, that is a huge job.
Yeah,
right there.
So Pete was okay because Pete was ready to take the reins and wanted to take his shot. I was the CEO for 10 years, so he takes the reins. I go over here, and then once I went over here and he starts to see the checks. I mean, we had another mentor, this guy Tony Lee, and he had said to us one time, he said, you got, during the fighting periods, he said, you don't see David's value because there's not many Davids in the world, right? Like David he's a gift. He has a gift. I've learned other people refer to us as like golden boys, people that know how to touch stuff and make it happen.
Yeah.
I'm more lovingly refer to myself as like a truffle pig, right? I just know how to seek out opportunity.
Yeah.
And the difference is the maturation of who I am, which is, talk about hustle. A truffle pig can find a truffle that's this big, or they can find something that's huge.
Yep.
I learned to stop chasing the little guys, right? Like my first mentor, that Bill Silverman told me, fast nickels are better than slow dimes. I have it printed in my office at my house. And I realized that I got really good at chasing and finding fast nickels, but it wasn't appealing to me anymore.
Yeah.
And I wanted to look for like really slow dollars.
Yeah.
So I evolved there, and Pete and I think Pete also learned to trust me and my abilities to network, my abilities to do business, my abilities to do business development. Excuse me. And that's why he never got crazy about me doing the bullshit.
Of course.
Yeah.
So, how do you even manage a property this big? How does it work? Do you hire a team now?
Yeah. So we have a community director who leads the whole building.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not property management, right? Like we've taken real estate and we've sort of upended it. And it's like we have it's hospitality.
Yeah.
Right. So we have a hospitality leader, Erica. She's also taking on. We get a lot of inbounds for us to build more of these.
Of course.
From governments.
Wow.
As well as developers. So she qualifies that stuff if, and it's going to take a really specific type of a deal for us to.
I was going to say, do you think you do it?
Yeah. I mean, we had one under contract before COVID, and then COVID hit and we pulled out of the deal because we didn't know what was going to go on. And it's like, there has to be certain things that have to happen. But we have her, she's great. We do tons of events, right? Like, so the reason why people came back and we've been so successful post-COVID is because real estate people come in and they measure the walls and they check out the products we use and they take pictures to steal design, but they don't understand that that's such a small piece of it.
It's the community.
Yeah, like,
Of course.
I mean, and it's so silly, but like everything from the curated food trucks we invite to the building, to the Mario Kart, tournament we had the other day, to the Wind Down Wednesdays, to the chili competitions. Like, we saw community, how big, like, my thesis was how big could community be and how small can the communities be within that. It's big community is a network of small communities and nodes. So, and I think that's one of the things that I'm good at is I have vision, right? Like, I see stuff. I see stuff fast. Like, when I take those MBA assessments, what comes out of them is I live in a fucking helicopter and I'm looking at a board very differently than most people. And I'm like, oh my God, look at these two dots here. Like, they go together.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, how'd you see that? And more importantly, how'd you see it so fast? So that's how we set it up. And then we have property management, and we outsource a lot of the components to it, or we have some of it in-house. We do our own leasing. We filled up the whole building with like one broker. And I mean, it's a great building. It's got a ton of energy. The governor calls it his second office.
Wow.
Right? Like, both governors, the first one helped me get this done. The second one loves it here.
Lamont.
Yeah, Lamont, when he was running, he came here to talk to this community. Like, that's imagine that. Like,
Yeah, it's huge.
almost like, if you think about it, like the Chamber of Commerce, like the Chamber of Commerce would host an event for the future governor, for your electees to come and talk to people. Like, this community hosted an event for the governor. We had he brought the CFO of Google, Ruth Porat, I think her name is. And I interviewed them in front of everybody. And it's like, it's a very different, hard to understand approach to like a traditional real estate developer.
Yeah.
It's also not stamp and repeat either, right? You can't just do this in other places. Like, if I'm looking at Hartford right now, I want to do something completely different in Hartford. That is what I'm looking at, like a city, and I'm saying, or town, and I'm saying, what does that need to be cool? Like, what is it going to take?
What does the community need?
Yeah, for people to get hype about it, like, like that kind of thing. Marketing.
Yeah. So now, like, how much of your time is around district?
Very little.
It's incredible.
Yeah, so Erica runs Point. Eric O'Brien is doing real estate, like $30 million plus real estate developments, and he just sold his business to a bank, and he's on the real estate side of that stuff. Eric is looking at a spot in Charlotte right now, and
Charlotte.
and Hartford. So a little bit of time. Usually it's like I come in, I'm like the whiz kid. I come in to have the quick conversations with architects or with owners and developers or mayors or whatever. Like, the mayor of Hartford was the one that called me up and he's like, hey, I want you to come down. I really liked him. And he introduced me to people. And big, that's another big one. I had another mentor, Wilder Baker. He passed away. All my mentors have passed away. It's fucking crazy. That's what happens when you know so many gray hairs.
I was going to say, and now you're the mentor.
Yeah.
Like, we haven't gotten to that part yet.
Yeah, hopefully I don't pass away anytime soon.
No.
Where are you going with that, Zach?
No. It's more thinking like,
the time, we question, right? Did you pick up on that?
Well, yes, of course, you could look at it that way because I am a very morbid human being. But I was also thinking, like, we've talked about, you've named like a dozen incredible entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
But like, we haven't gotten to like you giving back, because I know when you look at your LinkedIn, when you watch your podcast, you being a mentor is really a meaningful, impactful part of your life.
Yeah.
And I know, watching you do the podcast, it's like you're learning so much about yourself by hearing younger people talk about their journey. So, you're getting gray hairs, but I think thinking about how important it's been for you, like you lost your mother at a super young age. You watched your father be a super, and you made way more money than he did, right? So it's like now you must see, especially in a place like this, where it's like you see these guys hustling, they just want to make their first million.
Yeah.
And I know you have a nonprofit in district. You want to just talk about that quickly?
Yeah, sure. So I was just going to say, so Wilder Baker told me he was a Yaley. He ran Warwick, Baker, and O'Neill. He worked under David Ogilvy, and he told me, the age-old, your net worth is your network.
Yep.
And I took that really serious because I was like, fuck, I got a terrible network. My networks are all gangsters. Like, if you need somebody black bags, I got you. But I took that really seriously. So now mayors call me, governors call me. Like, it's not unheard of for my phone to ring and Ned Lamont's like, hey, Dave, can I talk to you? And I'm like, it's kind of crazy to think about it.
Yeah.
From where I'm from to where I am today. But yeah, I've always been, because of where I come from, because of the deep love and respect I have for my father and my family, I love helping people come up, right? Like, I love helping, putting a hand out. And I feel like it's, I recently heard a quote. It was Nipsey Hussle who says, like, the greatest blessing from God is the ability to inspire, right? So the nonprofit was around, again, solving, I'm always multi-angles, right? So it's like, in order for the startup community to be bolstered up, you need more talent. There's not enough talent coming out of the college system, so you got to go and figure something else out. So I started an education program for adults, doing adult ed 18 plus.
Wow.
Teaching full stack development, technology development, because you don't need to go to college. It's a language. If you're matter of fact, if any of you listening to this are musicians or have children that are musicians that are really talented at guitar playing or piano, that's a code.
Yep.
And there's a high probability that they would be really good at computer science. So, so we did that, and I found like a really innovative program to do that. Unfortunately, it failed because it takes a community, it takes a village to make this stuff work, and a lot of people were just singing a lot of bullshit. Like for them, like DE&I is lipstick. It's mostly bullshit for people. So the corporations, they write little bullshit checks, and it's like, if you look at the places that are succeeding, they're like quadrupling down on the bets that they're making. And you got family offices and foundations that are putting up 10, 20, $30 million at a time. And here I'm like begging people for scraps, $25,000 checks, $75,000 checks, corporations that have got billions of dollars. Of
course.
But they say they need the talent, but the truth of the matter is they'll just as easily outsource it to like the Indian outsourcing companies, the Infosys of the world and so on. So, and then the other problem was the cities that needed it the most, New Haven, for example, those education systems are so underfunded and as a result, poorly run and operated, or they don't have the right resources, that what happens is you wind up in a situation where the pipeline of kids that could go directly from high school into an adult ed program to learn something is not there because you can't talk to them and they don't know. Right? Like I would get kids in, I was asking principals, like, just let me Steve Jobs this shit, right? Because I'm going to show up. I look the way I look. Yep. I'm super urban guy. I'm going to inspire, right? I'm going to get 75% of the kids to think about computer science. And they would never let me do that. So they would hand pick 15 kids to come and talk to us, or 30 kids to do like a tour.
Yeah.
And the problem is they're going after the kids that were the smartest,
right.
and most capable.
Just think of that.
And I know in my mind, I would not be selected. Right. If that was me in that high school, they weren't picking me because I'm the shithead that's outside, causing trouble.
Yeah.
But I actually probably could have been really successful at computer science. I was in different ways. But so anyway, I'd get these kids in and I'd be like, I'd find a string, like a story. I'd tell them a story. I'd find a string like, you guys into sneakers? You're always going to hit them on, like urban, absolutely, clothes, whatever. And I'd be like, who saw the new Jordan 1 Dior's. They're going for $10,000, and then you see a
25 grand now.
Now 25 grand, but at the time 10,000, right? I'd be like, who saw those? And they'd be like, oh, me, and I'm like, okay, great. Who wants to see them on their feet right now? And they'd be like, for how? And I'd pull out GOAT, and I'd go to the AR app, and I'd show them, and I'd be like, check this out. And they would see it, and I'd be like, that's technology. That's computer science.
It's genius.
And then I would say something like provocative, and I'd say, guess what? That app is owned by guys that don't look like you. And they'd be like, huh? And I'd be like, yeah. I was like, GOAT, StockX. They sell sneakers. They sell streetwear. I was like, no black owners. No Spanish
of nerdy white people.
Yeah. And I was like, don't you want to take that shit back? Don't you want to build that?
It's your culture.
And the teachers would be like, and I'm uniquely qualified to say that because A, I'm fucking urban as it is, and B, like my Hispanic background gives me the blocker where it's like you can't fucking cancel me for stupid shit like that, right? And I'm also like loved by the communities. Like the black community loves me, the Hispanic communities love me. And I'm like, and I want to punch people in the fucking face. Like I want people to understand, like my father didn't know computer science and what it could do.
Yep.
I want you to know. I want you to go back and tell your parents about it, right? I want you to be like, this guy said this really impactful thing to me. So anyway, we wound up pivoting. So my sort of vision for it didn't work out, sadly. And then I found this great guy, Al, the AM bot, and he had a bigger vision for education and his whole approach to like, you know, the government refers to the job pipeline. You know, that's basically referring to kids as oil, right?
Yeah.
Like that's pretty shitty.
Yeah.
And he's got this sort of mentality around that. I passed him the reins, and then after 5 years, I stepped down as the chairman, and he took over, and he moved it into high schools, and now he runs 80 I think it's 80 students in Stamford, Connecticut, at the Synchrony building. Synchrony backed him. All high schools in New Haven report to his new facility. We moved him out of the building. Now he's downtown by the bus stops. And he does New Haven. I think he just got a deal in Bridgeport and Waterbury. And he's touching hundreds of kids now.
And those are the neighborhoods that need it.
Yeah, exactly. And he's teaching them digital media and technology, and also like they're going to be needed, right? Like he makes a really good point when he talks about like Alexa and Siri are female voices, right? They're servants and they're female voices.
Yep.
And he's like, why is that?
Right.
Right. So like, what does that say to girls?
Yep.
Right. Like, and there's like these little things that you don't realize are programmed because the programmers are men, right? And they're mostly white men.
It's like when Slack and Apple started putting colors into the emojis, and like, okay, sure, with my group of friends, you don't notice, but when you have Slack and you have a business in New York City,
and the black hand comes up.
Exactly. And you start seeing that and you start thinking to yourself, how fucked up is that everything is was white. Yeah. And now you start seeing that and you see how much of it makes a difference in just the way you visualize a community, especially, my community where it's like 85% black, 10% Latino, 5% white.
Yeah.
Why, so it's pretty incredible to see that. So I think that's amazing that
Yeah. So that was it. I mean, I've been on the board of, I was on the board of Best Buddies. I was on the board. I met your brother on the board of Make-A-Wish. I was on the board of United Way for the region. I'm always giving back, always. Even when I hustle, like I threw a festival in that building across the street one time just to see if I could do it. It was called the 4B Festival, beer, bourbon, barbecue, and bacon. And I sold 2,000 tickets. I made like $250,000 in one day, and donated a bunch of money to Success by Six. Like I'm always like
pushing the limits.
Yeah, and like letting people like eat. Like there's a seat. They say there's an ass for every seat. Like that was one of my mentors taught me that. And I wasn't able to give back for a long time. I used to tell nonprofits, I can give you my brain, but I'm not a big donor, right? Because I don't have that type of capital. So. But now if I can give back using my brain and my power and what I do as much as I possibly can.
It sounds like you have so much on your plate. It's incredible that you can manage all of this brain power.
Yeah, I don't manage it. I mean, I do as best as I can. I typically find I recruit people that can come in and like take advantage of what I can pull together. the other thing, so I got that, and then recently I won all of the licenses for cannabis in the state of Connecticut.
Yeah.
So I have a vertical license, which allows me cultivation, manufacturing, food and beverage, manufacturing, packaging, transport, and retail. And then I also won the delivery licenses to the home. I won 2 out of the 10 of those, and an additional food and beverage license. So I'm standing all that up now. So I've got like 8 real estate deals in the works. I'm, buying equipment, canning lines. I'm going heavy into beverage.
Yeah, I saw your pitch. It's really,
It's thanks.
top tier.
Yeah, and it's just getting better. I mean, we're closing on our I got like superstar locations. I got a whole thesis around. So the whole reason why I went in, I wasn't going to go in. I was around the cannabis business since I'm 12.
Yeah.
Street kid.
Yeah.
I used to bag weed for the drug dealers.
Yep.
They'd pay me $100 to bag pounds of Mexican brick weed. And
Kids nowadays don't even understand what that means.
I mean, dude, I when I tell you I hustled, my brother and I could make $1,000 on a snow day, not even touching driveways. We used to just walk the streets and do the parallel park cars that were getting plowed in because they can't get out. So you get $25 to $50 a car, depending on how desperate somebody was to get to work. Yeah. And we wouldn't even have to dig too much. We would dig enough to get the tires traction, and then we'd get behind the car and we'd push them, and we'd push them out. We'd get paid. We'd make a ton. We hustled, man. I love the hustle.
So
the cannabis stuff is now raising capital, doing that.
So I saw your pitch. It's incredible. I know that this is a huge passion of yours, right? So this must be exciting to you because you've been passionate about the other things in different ways, right? But this is something that I know by watching it, it's like you dreamed of this as a kid. You saw not only the legalization behind it happen, but also the boom, right?
Yeah. My brother used to say in college, I was flipping, I might have dabbled in the flip game of certain pharmaceuticals in college. My brother knew because I was paying for everything. And he said, if this shit ever goes legal, he said, you're going to be incredible at it. Because I have a tremendous respect for the flower.
Of course.
And what it does for people. Even more so, my brother just recently died in
terrible. I'm sorry.
About a little less than 2 years ago, from pancreatic cancer, and cannabis helped him, right? Like I watched him, he needed it, right? And the pills and all the shit that they would gassing him up with, he, mentally, he needed it. My father died recently from cancer, and, he got COVID in the middle of his chemo treatment, and he lost his taste buds, so he couldn't eat. And they say that the weight loss is what kills you with cancer. So I was able to feed him for the first time in his life. My father drugs for my father.
He didn't understand
what were for white people,
right?
Because they would export them from Peru, cocaine and marijuana, and sell it to the Americans, right? So, and they would ruin families, and they would killing people and all the cartel stuff, right? So like he was very anti anything.
Yeah.
And I was like, you got to eat this gummy. It's going to give you your appetite back. And 68 years old, I got to be eating gummies. And then I remember 2 milligrams did nothing, 5 milligrams did nothing, 7.5 milligrams. My sister sends me a video, and he's plowing pasta in his mouth, and he's got his appetite back. And because the taste buds,
of course,
it was able to like trick his brain. I think that, I just have a complete different mentality towards it, and I'm really passionate about it. I'm like super excited about it, and I think we can be the number one brand in the state of Connecticut,
right? Which is huge.
Dominate, because I know the customer, and I know the people, and I know the land, right? It's like this is my turf, and it's all MSOs, and I just really feel like we can fuck people up.
Yeah. So I mean, I have cancer. I'm in remission now, but so cannabis has been huge for me. I mean, I never was a big drinker ever in my life, but obviously, growing up with my brother, being an entrepreneur, hustling, I mean, it's all, it's different people, but entrepreneurs usually love cannabis, right? Because it sparks the creativity.
Yeah.
It sparks
sleep,
self-conscious. People don't understand how important it is not to be too cocky, to be able to connect with someone. So
It also can ramp. I love it because I think it ramps you up and down, right? Like
Yeah.
you want to think more broadly. You go for a ramp up. If you want to like ramp down, because at the end of the day, like the more entrepreneurial you are, the harder it is to shut your brain off.
Yeah, of course.
So that's a big component to it.
Right, and sleep is probably the most important thing in the world, right?
Yeah.
Sleep and time. So when I think about how amazing it is that we're now, because I got kicked out of college for weed. You know, I went to UConn, state school, zero tolerance policy. They didn't even catch me smoking, but my roommate was, and they expelled me from school, which I ended up going back and graduating and getting the expulsion takeaway. But now
they have a cannabis. They have a focus on cannabis now at the school. It's crazy.
Yeah. So thinking about how much has changed in 10 years with weed is insane. Seeing your pitch, seeing that you're going to, you know, your different types of focus in the flower industry, like where do you see it going?
I think the most exciting part about cannabis is innovation. So companies like, and I invested in one of them, 1906, they do pills. So they do pills based off of modality. So they have Go, Sleep, Go, Midnight, Bliss, Love for sex. And they're taking THC and CBD or other cannabinoids and then mixing it with supplements and to create effects. I think that's really interesting. I think.
Do you love CBD?
I mean, I don't necessarily know if I buy into CBD on its own. Personally, I think it's
the one-to-one.
It's hit or miss with everybody. But I know another guy who's working on polymers right now so that they can take the majors and the minor cannabinoids and do time release like pharmaceuticals can.
Wow.
So that they can chain them together and like this one hits in 10 minutes and this comes out and like that. To me, that innovation is crazy. I don't believe in flower as much as everybody did. Like years ago, that's all we did, right? It was like that's
smoked.
Yeah, well, it's the stroke and the bowls and the bongs and the blunts and the strains and all that stuff. I think the country has put so much effort into stopping people from smoking cigarettes. For them to allow the boom of cannabis to create a bunch of smokers again, I think is a dangerous proposition, especially because of like molds and microbials and all the issues that come along with it and the testing that has to happen. But also because like we just came out of a respiratory pandemic. So and then when I look at people like my mother-in-law, my father, and like people. There's so many people that don't smoke these days. Anything to give them anything that's inhalable, I think, is a mistake. So I think that there's the future of nanoemulsion or bioabsorption for your stomach and like the edibles and the beverages. I think in 10 years, mark my words, in 10 years you'll walk into a bar and you'll order a drink and you'll decide whether or not you want it to be an alcoholic drink or a THC drink at the bar. 10 years. I think it'll be less in some states, like maybe 3 to 5 in some states.
Oregon, Colorado.
Minnesota has it already. Minnesota was the first. They just did it through the hemp-derived line.
Shout out to Minnesota. I fucking love Minnesota.
Yeah, they did it through the Farm Bill. I think social consumption. I think also the big misconception of like super stoners that are like throwing like diamonds and shatter and all this stuff into product. To get like super high, I think is like I think that's the negative side of cannabis. I think there are people that need it, that need that strength.
Of course.
On the medical side, like I know a guy that could take 1,000 milligrams. It's crazy to me.
And he's fine.
But like I think that the microdose 2 milligram, 5 milligram, 10 milligram space is a fascinating space.
Yeah. I mean that's basically the only way I use cannabis now.
Yeah.
Very small amounts, 1 milligram, 2 milligrams, enough where it takes my mind off things, but not too much where I overthink things.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the reason why most people, if you ever talk to somebody that says, I tried it once and I didn't like it, it's almost a guarantee they overdosed.
Yeah, of course.
And that is the issue with...
Because it was homemade, they don't have no clue how much...
Or even if you smoked it. It's impossible with a combustible... to understand the dose that you're getting.
Right.
So I think dosage innovation.
It's like alcohol, same exact concept.
Yeah, and that's what, and I also think from a legislative perspective, that's the biggest problem that's holding us back, is that the states are legalizing, but they're typically over-legislating and over-regulating the space because they don't know. Like, I was in a room the other day. I'm doing quite a bit of lobbying now, which I think is an important part of entrepreneurship. And, you know, I'm telling people, and I heard this guy who's a state rep say, you know, that UConn requested, or CCSU requested extra money for them to help them with cannabis overdoses, that they're predicting they're going to be more of them. And this guy was like, so what do we have to do? Send them Narcan? And everybody laughed. It's like, no, you need a fucking plier to take the pizza out of their mouth while they're sleeping.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there's such a misconception that like people are dying from overdoses. I mean, there are syndromes, and there's a small percentage of people that have I forget what it's called, like cannabinoid hyper. There's a term for it.
You also
There's a small group of people that are allergic to THC.
Yeah.
And they can get sick, but like the way that they treat it, and like, you would never lock your beer up in your fridge to keep it from your children.
Right.
And the can still looks like the can that they drink their seltzer out of.
Right.
But they look the other way. You know, you don't lock your sugar cabinet, and there's proof that sugar is addictive and it's horrible.
And it gives you cancer and diabetes
and all kinds of issues that they've already let happen.
Right.
So I think that there's a lot of innovation that has to happen in that space, but I'm for it, man. I love
I'm for it too. And
plus I'm a scrappy motherfucker, and if people want to fight, let's go.
yeah. And I also think, I mean, look at me. Look at you. We're successful.
Oh yeah. The concept of like a stoner or like someone that uses any type of THC that's not productive is insane.
Yeah, I would make the argument that you could never go out for a night, party your ass off, and then wake up the next morning.
No.
Last night after I was done working, ate a little bit of edibles. This morning I was up at 6 o'clock in the morning sitting in an ice bath. So
yeah, that's nice. Yeah, exactly. When Pete first met me, I think I walked outside and I might have like partaken in something, and I come back in and he goes, oh, I didn't know you were a stoner. And I said, excuse me? And he's like, we were just business partners. And he got really upset. And I looked at him and I said, shut the fuck up. I said, I'll run circles around you. And he was like, and then he realized after, crazy productive.
Yeah.
Right? Like back in the day, we used to get high and go to the gym.
Oh, for sure. I know a ton of,
Yeah, it's just a big misconception because it didn't do well for them, or maybe somebody was lazy around them. You know, there's always going to be the people that make it worse for everybody. But I would say that I know the worst people. I know the nicest people that are the worst alcoholics ever.
Yep.
And when they hit that bottle, they change.
Yep.
It's like there's always gonna be somebody that fucks it up for somebody.
Of course.
But I love the space. It's hard. It's not a gold rush. I would tell everybody, like, you got to be smart. There's a lot of people that make the same mistake over and over and over and over. Like, the one thing people say about me is that they're pretty amazed of how quickly I've learned the space and how I dove in, because I'm like a scuba dive on this stuff. I'm like, I want to know everything.
Yeah.
And I question every question, and I hear people say flower's king, and I'm like, but how if the register is getting less and less flower sales?
Of course.
And you pick up on those trends and you see where the puck is going. You know, the old saying, skate to where the puck is going, not to where it's at. And that's my focus there.
And are you looking for investors for this?
Yeah. We're raising, we're probably going to raise somewhere between $15 and $22 million in total, which is a combination of operations and our real estate. We've circled quite a bit already. And we're laser focused on premium real estate for retail. And then we've got some really interesting sort of target focuses on the product side. So we're going to lean beverage first instead of edible. We're going to go right after concentrate instead of trophy flower.
Yeah.
And we're going to play in that space. We're studying outdoor grow and instead of indoor, and so we're really looking to focus on not ruining the not taking too much risk with the investor capital, and falling into the what I think is the free falling flower markets that are happening in every space. And that's it. And I can't wait. And then the marketing side, I'm just like stoked, man. I'm all about the customer. Plus I have delivery. So I'm like, I joke around and I say, I'm like, doobies meet Uber. I'm called the Doober. It's crazy. I said that on a video, and then this dude calls me up and he has lunch with me from Connecticut.
And
he wants to invest. No, he owns Doober.com, and he's owned it for like years.
Wow.
So he had that idea of Doober. And I was like, that's fucking cool. And yeah, that's it. I'm stoked. I'm also looking, I've got a couple districts in the mix, but I've got people now, and I'm focused on that stuff.
So I'm assuming that when you're looking for investors, right, you're not just looking for smaller people who love cannabis. Is there a certain requirement that you're looking for?
Well, I think so for the most part, the majority of the raise has to be accredited investors, which there's a checklist. You have to make X amount of dollars per year, have a net worth, yada, yada, yada. And the check sizes are probably about $250,000 per check. But I do have smaller groups of people that are accredited that are coming together in groups. So I pitched like a cohort of like 28 guys the other day. We got 9 responses in the first week so far. 6 of them circled about $750,000 together. Okay. So they'll come in as an SPV, right? A single purpose vehicle, which is, for those of you that don't know, is just you set up an LLC and you roll up all these smaller checks under one, and then you're more likely to get into a round of funding because people don't want a ton of people on their cap table. So you can get a ton of people in your SPV and protect the corporation from the volume of conversations that have to happen. They just talk to you as the leader of the SPV. And then you talk to your investors and your stakeholders of the LLC instead. So we got 3 no's, 6 yeses for $750,000. I think we might have converted a bunch more yesterday. Famous people, Major League ball player is at the table. We got a couple celebrities that are interested.
Love it.
Yeah. So if you want to raise 15, you got to circle like 40.
Yep.
Because people, you never know what's going to happen.
Of course, especially right now.
Closing around right before SPV gets crushed, right?
Yeah.
SVB, Silicon Valley Bank, gets crushed and you're fucked.
Yep.
So you got to play all those games and stuff.
Now, all of a sudden, my brother was like, you got to check out your I Grow Brands Instagram.
Yeah.
It's absolutely insane how good of content you make.
Thank you.
You have your podcast, Forward Obsessed.
Yeah.
This feels like this is all relatively new, right?
Content, yeah. So I've been doing content for about 8 months. It's crazy. I should have been doing it for years.
Yeah, so
stupid.
That was my question. Why? Like, why all of a sudden now?
My brother dying was a big game changer for me. I was always all about privacy and like thinking. I had the wrong mindset around stuff, and then realizing that I could, my brother just one day got a stomach ache and all of a sudden it was like pancreatic cancer. And then 13 months later, he was gone.
Wow.
Right. Like, and that could have happened in 3 months. They gave him 3 months to live. Right. Mm-hmm. So it's like to think that my kids, my family don't know about my character. Right. Like I love humor. Like I'm always trying to be funny. Like I love to be funny. Like my father was like that. I love humor, I'm a stand-up guy. I have, my morals and my values, the mistakes I make, the confidence that I have, and that I want to pass on. Like the last couple of weeks, my daughter's been dealing with a bully, or bullying, I should say. I'm there to teach her about confidence and to guide her to figure out her way. But like, what happens if I'm not there? My brother left behind 2 boys. Right? 6 years old. One of them was 6 years old. And the other was 14. Like, where do they look? I don't have them, Marcus Aurelius's fucking diaries, right?
Yeah.
Like, where's my diaries? So I just started cranking out content. It started off with like, just someone said that they really admired how quickly I bounced back from my brother's passing. And they were like, you should help people with that, because my boy said it to me, actually, David Beckerman's grandson. He said, I know so many people that lose really key people in their life and they get fucked for years. He's like, they go in these deep, dark holes, they disappear for 3 years, 5 years, sometimes they never recover.
Of course.
And he was like, you recovered so quickly. You should talk about that. And I was like, the reason why I recovered is because I've got crazy scar tissue, right? Like they say when you lose a parent before the age of 15, 90-something% of people, Malcolm Gladwell talks about this in a book, like I think it's like 99% of people will go into like pretty bad places for the rest of their life. And then there's this small percentage of people that become exceptional. My brother read that book because I don't read a ton of books, and he was like, they're talking about you. And he was, my mother died in 92 in September. My mother's brother, who was like my older brother, and I used to spend summers with him, was my Uncle Mitchell. I used to call him Muno. And he died 4 months later in a car accident, back to back, right before my 13th birthday, in January. And I've seen people shot and killed in my life. Like I've seen people stabbed. I've seen people stabbed in school, right? In high school. Like I've seen.
Supposed to be safe.
Yeah. Like someone told me one time that people have little T and big T. I got a lot of big T in my life. And I think that it shaped me into who I am, and it made me recover from Paul, my brother, quickly. And I'm not recovered. I cried probably 2 days ago.
Of course.
My father just died in December. So that's how it started. And then from there, I started getting good at it. And by good, I just mean like, I just don't give a fuck. Like, I don't care. Like, I've heard people talk shit about me. People call me the fake Andrew Tate.
That's funny.
They call me the Walmart Andrew Tate. Call me Andrew Fake. Meanwhile, I have hair. I shaved my head because of my brother, and I never went back to it.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
So and then I realized I was inspiring people. Like I only have I think I just passed 1,500 people on Instagram. My account reaches 40,000 a month. Right. And I get more DMs. I got one today. This girl's like, I love this. I had a woman walk up to me at the gym the other day, and she was like, I'm blown away by the thing you said. And I was like, who are you?
Right.
Right? And you realize that there's this invisible thing that people can't see. People see the likes and the views and the heart and the comments, but they don't see the DMs. They don't see the love I get. I walked into a juice place in the middle of Norwalk, and somebody walked up to me and they were like, I love the shit you're doing. We were at a bar. Pete and I were at a bar in New York, and this woman walked up to us and she was like, are you Dave and Pete from Forward Obsessed? And we were like, what and she was like, I love the content, and I love the fact how you approach it. It's not about Lambos and that lifestyle, but it's about the real part of entrepreneurship and all that kind of stuff. And then once you get a taste of that, once you realize that, and once you let go of, I'm really not a big deal, so it doesn't matter if what people think about me, because there's people that say, I don't like Dave's content, and it sounds rah, rah, rah. Of course. And they're dealing with their insecurities and their fear and their biases. Once you realize that doesn't fucking matter, then
you do it for you.
You do it for you. And again, I'm doing it for me. The biggest thing I'm doing for my kids. Dad's gone tomorrow.
Yeah.
Dad, they're gonna know Dad. They're gonna know how, they're gonna be like, my dad was a fucking cool dude, and he was a fucking he's been through a fucking war in his life, and he was still there for us and all that kind of shit. So
it's crazy. I mean, obviously you could see I'm getting emotional, but that's, part of the reason I'm doing it, right? So it's like,
you got kids?
Yep. Got a daughter, 2.5. I've got a son on the way. She's 7 months pregnant. I want to end with this because I think you could hear how important it is to you, your family. How do you juggle being an entrepreneur and also be a great father, be a great husband? I'm not saying it on a day-to-day basis. I'm sure you have your fuck-ups just like I do and everyone else does.
Yeah.
But I could tell you're a great father. I could tell that family is so important to you. So how do you manage the stress of this and also, make sure you're present for your family?
So for me, the stress I never allow the stress to be that big, right? When the worst of the worst times come, I always say, I'm going to let this fuck with me for one day.
Mm.
I say it. People around me know this. Actually, I'm in my day. And you could I'll probably have 4 of those a year. where it's like it becomes too much.
Yeah.
But when I lay my head down that night and I wake up,
It's a new day.
every time that either that shower, that drive to work, things start to change, right? Know that. Also, you got to put it on a scale and you got to make it relevant to life, right? Like you're in remission from cancer right now. Fuck everything, right? You could not be here for that baby that's coming, of course. So I tell everybody, on a scale of 1 to 10, if 10 is like fucking all hell is breaking loose, there's nothing in your entrepreneurial life or your workplace or your job that should ever exceed a 5.
Yeah.
Ever exceed a 5.
Yeah.
After the 5, it's your health. It's your children's health. It's your brother. It's your mom. It's your dad. It's all that stuff.
For sure.
That's the stuff that exceeds the 5 to 10 space.
For sure.
Nothing else should get in your fucking face for that stuff. Like, and if you give it that much value, it's you.
Yeah.
So for me, I prioritize my kids, right? Like I had to go to school the other day. I got a lot of shit going on. I'm like, nope, I didn't even think about my work. I was going to the school. I'm doing what I got to do. Now I'll come
And you
home.
kick the shit out of that little girl, so that's good.
No, I
You
did
get arrested.
Yeah. My daughter might have. Shout out to Brooklyn. I love you, baby.
Oh, is that her name?
Yeah.
I love it.
I got Brooklyn, August, and London. Those are my
Wow.
2 girls and a boy. So I got I will go home and I will cook dinner 2 or 3 days a week with an earbud in on the phone call, right? With them screaming in the background. I'm still there.
Yep.
I'm cooking dinner, right? Like I'll try to do that. And honestly also give yourself a little bit, I think for all entrepreneurs, give yourself a little bit of grace in understanding that like yesterday I said to my wife, like we do like one date night every 2 months. And I'm like, I want to do one every week. I don't care. I want to do it every week. And she was like, all right. And I was like, and then I want to try a movie night, right? And let's have a coffee, like
Love it.
let's find like be better. Like if you go back and you look at like the story that I told during this podcast and you go back to where I was and where I was from, right? Like to where I am today, that is a constant improvement.
Yep.
Like I've been like, I've had the worst anger management issues, right? Like I have scars. I have the worst, I've been in horrible fights. I've seen my friends that I grew up with stab people and do crazy shit. And here I am today, right?
Look at me now.
I've lost money. I've made money, right? Like, just put it on a scale of relevance and decide what's important and just give yourself a little grace and just try to be better, right? Like I reprimanded my son the other day. My wife got really, really upset with me the way I handled it. And in my mind, I justified it by telling her how bad I had gotten reprimanded when I was a kid and how this was nothing. And yet I could see how upset she was from it. And I was like, let me go and do the work and find out what I could do better.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's it. Right? I think that's at the end of the day, we're just trying to be better versions of who brought us to be. I know I have talked to your brother, so I know your family was you lived a certain way. Like my father didn't have that.
Yeah.
Right? Like he was one of 9, technically one of 17. My grandfather had 3 families, right? Like third world country. So like my father did his very best and he was awesome. And I didn't know how awesome he was until we were older.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, how can I be more awesome?
Yeah.
Right. And that's it. You just gotta like, you gotta give yourself grace. You gotta be better. You gotta talk to people. You gotta be around the energy, and that's it. And that's all I can do while I'm here. That's where the rubber meets the road for me.
If you could have a billboard anywhere in the world, what would it say and why?
I have a billboard. I own one. It's on the property.
All right. So how about, let's say, if you could have a billboard that is paid for by me, has nothing to do with the work, just some motivational, something based upon what your experience in life has been, what would it say and why? You're the first person, by the way, that actually has a billboard. 29 podcasts. We finally hit that roadblock.
I always just tell. My father and I used to say it over and over. It is what it is.
Love it.
It's not a motivational thing. You could say I have 100 different sayings. You heard them today on the podcast, but like, it is what it is, right? Like, you can do all the things in your power. At the end of the day, you could get cancer, right? It is what it is. And you have a choice of making it, like I told my daughter with the bullying, I said, you have a choice. It is what it is means you decide what it is, right? You have a choice. If the kids are bothering you, if they're getting dopamine by fucking with you, you're giving them real estate in your head.
Yep.
That's your decision. So it is what it is something that is so profound in its statement. I think that's it. And then if I could have a subtext, it would be stop giving a fuck, right? Like, and what that means is like the book, like the subtle art of not,
such a good book,
of not giving a fuck or whatever, or zero fuck,
his name,
whatever it was, which I didn't read, but I
it's so good.
But it's about knowing where to invest,
Yeah.
right? And like, I talk to my daughter about that all the time. I'm like, investing in yourself, right? Like that's, I feel like Pete, you heard today, Pete and I had a coach, which was really like a therapist, relationship therapist. You know, I've done it with my wife. You know, I listen to podcasts like you. You know, I try to make myself better and health wise. I chase, you know, life hacks and body hacks and human hacks and shit like that. And I'm just always trying to make myself better. And that's all you can do while you're here, because it's a short period of time.
Yeah.
And then it is what it is.
People want to find you on social media.
Yeah.
What's the best way?
I grow brands on everything except for LinkedIn. I'm just David Salinas. I grow brands on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on TikTok, on Twitter, on YouTube. I've got the podcast, Forward Obsessed, which is at Forward Obsessed on Instagram, forwardobsessed.com to get to all the platforms.
A great website, by the way.
All that stuff, thanks. We just launched a new podcast called Major Gems with my boy Jay Majors, who's a incredible entrepreneur. Also, incredible story. Kid was like stabbed multiple times, went to jail, came out. He's a multimillionaire now, incredible businessman. And me and him are doing something for his markets called Major Gems, which we just started like recording a couple recently. I haven't created my brand yet for the cannabis business, so that's underway. My other business is digitalcertains.com, districtnhp.com. Yeah.
Amazing story.
And I'm always available. Like, people want to talk, if they need any help or whatever, if I can afford it, I'm happy to help people up.
That wraps up episode 29, the Hustle Chronicles podcast. Recently rebranded, didn't even realize at the time, but it stands for THC Podcast. So make sure you find us on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. Thank you so much for your time, sharing your story. It was super powerful, and I know people are going to absolutely love this and be really inspired by this conversation. So,
yeah, and I want to get you, and we're going to come back, and I'm going to have you on, maybe we'll get you on Major Gems or something.
Cool.
Yeah, Forward Obsessed, you got to come and rock with us.
Thank you so much.
Cool.
Love you.
Yeah, thanks.
Peace. Is it